Legend has it the screams carried for miles. In the summer of 1462, you are a soldier in the Ottoman army, the most formidable military force on the planet. You have seen the fall of Constantinople and watched empires crumble before you as you march into a minor principality known as Wallachia. The objective: to put down a rebellious prince, a mission that should conclude in weeks, if not days. But then you smell it, the unmistakable stench of death and rot, and something else, an odor you can't quite identify. Your formation slows to a crawl, the forward scouts are frozen, and as you crest the hill near the capital, you behold it, a forest, except the trees are not trees. They are human beings, 20,000 of them, a grotesque monument to a new kind of dark history. Your brothers in arms, your own comrades, hoisted high on wooden pikes, arranged in flawless, geometric rows that stretch as far as the eye can see. Some have been decaying for weeks, their bodies bloated and blackened by the sun. Others, however, are still twitching, still drawing breath, still screaming in silence. Your Sultan, the very man who conquered the Byzantine Empire, takes one look at the horror and orders his entire army to turn back. What sort of mind could ever conceive of such a thing? And here is the fact that should truly terrify you. This was not madness. It was strategy. It was cold, calculated, and terrifyingly effective. The story you believe you know about Vlad the Impaler is a fabrication, not because it's untrue, but because the reality is immeasurably worse. This is the complete chronicle of how one man weaponized human suffering so masterfully that he altered the course of empires. And by the end, you will grasp why the true terror was not what he inflicted upon their bodies, but what he did to their minds. Let us begin with a question that is seldom asked. What can break a human being so profoundly that they become capable of this? The year is 1442. Vlad is a boy of 11. His father, Vlad II, known as Dracula, or the Dragon, has just made a pact with a devil, not a metaphorical one, but a real one with a name. Sultan Mehmed II of the Ottoman Empire. The arrangement is straightforward. Vlad II retains his throne in Wallachia, and in exchange, he must surrender his two youngest sons as hostages. They are to be insurance, living collateral to ensure his absolute loyalty. And so, young Vlad and his brother Radu are torn from their home and escorted deep into the heart of the Ottoman Empire, not as captives in a dungeon, but as esteemed guests in the palaces at Edirne and later, Egri. They are given fine clothing, a superb education, and intensive military training. They are instructed in Turkish, Arabic, philosophy, and the Quran. On the surface, it appeared to be a life of privilege, but here is the part of their dark history that the official records gloss over. This was not an education, it was psychological warfare. Vlad spent his formative years, from age 11 to 17, observing his captors as they perfected the art of empire building. He studied how the Ottomans used fear as a tool of control. He witnessed public executions, engineered not simply to punish the guilty, but to traumatize entire populations into total submission. He learned that terror, when applied with surgical precision, was more powerful than any army. And he learned another lesson, that he himself was completely and utterly powerless. While his younger brother Radu assimilated, even cultivating a close friendship with the Sultan's son, Mehmed, Vlad refused to yield. According to Ottoman court records, he was punished repeatedly for his defiance. Some accounts even suggest he was beaten and possibly tortured. The exact details have been lost to a dark history. But what remains certain is this: something fundamental inside him was shattered during those years. Or perhaps, more accurately, something crystallized. He developed what modern psychologists might term a persecution complex, coupled with an obsessive need for control. But he learned to channel it. Every punishment he was forced to endure, he studied. Every technique of torture he witnessed, he memorized. He was assembling a mental arsenal, piece by agonizing piece. In 1448, after 6 years of captivity, Vlad finally returned to Wallachia. He was 17 years old. Just 2 months later, his father was murdered by rival nobles. Betrayed by the nobility who vacillated between the Ottomans and Hungarians, his elder brother Mircea was entombed alive, leaving Vlad utterly alone. He was cornered by his enemies with no one to champion his cause. And it is here that his story takes a truly sinister turn. He wasn't merely seeking vengeance. He aimed to reshape the very world into a mirror of his own suffering. taking the lessons in terror the Ottomans had taught him and perfecting them into an art form they could never have conceived. But first, he was forced to bide his time for 6 long years, living in exile, scheming, preparing, and mastering the arts of military strategy and political cunning. Then, in 1456, backed by Hungarian forces, he at last claimed the Wallachian throne, and the monster was finally unleashed. If you are captivated by the psychological fractures that forged the most infamous figures of our past, be sure to subscribe, because we are only just beginning to uncover this chapter of dark history. We will now explore how this shattered boy transformed into something far more terrifying than his captors ever dreamed. Vlad's coronation feast in 1456 should have been a moment of triumph. Instead, it became the terrifying blueprint for his entire reign. He summoned the boyar families, the very same nobles who had engineered his father's assassination. They were the ones who had buried his brother alive, yet hundreds of them came, dressed in their most opulent attire, assuming they were there to profess fealty to their new ruler. The great hall was lavishly adorned, and the wine flowed without end. Then, amidst the celebration, Vlad rose and posed a deceptively simple question. "How many princes of Wallachia have you seen come and go?" The elder boyars, puffed with pride, answered 7, 10, with some even boasting they could recall a dozen different reigns. They were flaunting their resilience, their political shrewdness, and their uncanny ability to outlive any monarch who dared to occupy the throne. Vlad offered a chilling smile before issuing a single command. Every boyar who had spoken was to be arrested immediately. But this is where his methodical cruelty truly revealed itself. He did not have them put to death, not right away. Instead, he meticulously divided them into 2 groups, according to their age and physical condition. The older ones, the masterminds of his family's ruin, they were impaled without delay just beyond the palace walls, but not for a swift end. The stakes were positioned with surgical precision to bypass vital organs, guaranteeing a slow, agonizing demise over hours, even days. Their tormented cries became the harrowing soundtrack for the events that followed, a grim testament to this era's dark history. The younger, more robust boyars, along with their families, were stripped of their fine garments and force-marched 50 miles north to the crumbling ruins of Poenari Castle. There, they were presented with an ultimatum that was no choice at all: reconstruct the fortress using only their bare hands, or perish. For months on end, they hauled massive stones up the treacherous mountainside, working until their hands were raw and their noble attire had rotted from their backs, until they collapsed from sheer exhaustion. The majority did not survive the construction, and those who did were forever broken. Vlad had effectively annihilated the old aristocracy, replacing it with a new class, utterly dependent on his favor. They now lived in a state of absolute dread of his slightest displeasure. This was more than revenge. It was the systematic deconstruction of the very power structure that had rendered Wallachia vulnerable, and it exposed a critical aspect of Vlad's psyche. He didn't just demand obedience. He sought to shatter people so completely that obedience was the only instinct they had left. But this was merely the beginning, a matter of internal politics. The boyars were, after all, Wallachian. What Vlad orchestrated next would send tremors of fear across entire empires. In 1459, Sultan Mehmed II, the very same Mehmed who was once Vlad's companion in captivity, sent his envoys. They came to Wallachia to demand the annual tribute that Vlad's own father had consented to pay. The demand was accompanied by a further humiliation. Vlad was summoned to appear in person in Constantinople to reaffirm his oath as a vassal. The envoys arrived anticipating the usual diplomatic dance, perhaps some haggling, or even a counter-proposal. What they received was a glimpse into damnation itself. When they entered Vlad's court, they refused to remove their turbans, citing a genuine religious custom within Ottoman protocol. Vlad then asked them to elaborate on their tradition. They explained, likely feeling a sense of relief that he appeared to be a man of understanding, rather than one who would take offense. Vlad simply nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. Then he uttered words that surely turned their blood to ice. "I hold deep respect for a man who honors his faith so devoutly. Allow me to help you uphold it for eternity." He commanded his guards to affix their turbans permanently to their skulls with nails. Consider the meticulous nature of this cruelty. His intent was not to kill, but to permanently disfigure them. This act was a masterpiece of macabre symbolism, medically calculated to guarantee their survival for the grueling journey back to Constantinople. They were transformed into living, breathing messages of defiance. Their agonizing cries would have echoed through the countryside as they staggered back towards the Sultan. Imagine the scene when Mehmed finally received his envoys, the very men he had dispatched in good faith, now irrevocably maimed and teetering on the brink of madness from unrelenting pain. The message was received with chilling clarity. This wasn't the childhood friend he remembered, but a chilling new entity schooled in the terrifying lessons of the Ottomans' dark history, and twisted them into a form of psychological warfare so extreme it surpassed even the Ottoman imagination, a truly bleak chapter in our dark history. War was now a certainty, but before the armies marched, Vlad had further statements to make. Now, here is a crucial point that is often missed about impalement. It was not merely an execution, it was a horrifying form of engineering. The popular conception of a stake being violently driven through the torso would result in a swift death, but that would defeat the entire purpose. Vlad's technique was far more refined, and by extension, infinitely more sadistic. Drawing from modern medical analysis of historical descriptions and surviving Ottoman records, we can reconstruct the grim reality of how it was actually performed. First, the condemned person was placed face down. The stake itself was meticulously chosen, its tip rounded and not sharpened, and then lubricated generously with oil. It was then introduced into the body through the lower orifice. But this is the critical detail. It was not thrust straight up, but inserted at a precise angle, a trajectory specifically calculated to bypass all vital organs and major blood vessels. The victim was then hoisted upright, allowing gravity to perform the rest of the gruesome work over hours, sometimes even days. The person's own body weight would inexorably drive the stake further upwards through their torso, along a path deliberately designed to miss the heart, the lungs, and the great arteries. In certain documented instances from this period of dark history, the stake would eventually exit the body through the shoulder or chest, with the victim remaining conscious and alive for as long as 3 days. What was the purpose of such a method? Vlad intuitively understood a principle that modern experts in psychological warfare can now confirm. Witnessing protracted agony is exponentially more traumatizing than witnessing a swift demise. A battlefield execution is gruesome, yet it is over in a moment. Impalement, however, was a theatrical performance of suffering that could last for days, punctuated by screams that carried across entire valleys. Yet, the physical act was merely one part of the equation. The true, perverse genius of it all lay in its staging. When Vlad ordered impalements, he did so in the most public of spaces, in town squares, along major trade routes, and just outside the city gates, any location that would ensure the maximum number of onlookers. He knew that gossip and rumor would amplify the psychological terror far beyond the actual number of those who perished. A single impalement seen by 100 people would, in turn, create 100 storytellers, each of whom would then recount the horror to 100 more. He also continually refined the symbolism. The stakes were set at varying heights, corresponding to the victim's social rank, with peasants positioned low to the ground, nobles raised higher, and the most prominent stakes reserved for captured enemy commanders. This established a grotesque visual hierarchy that powerfully reinforced his message. The message was clear: everyone has a place in my dominion, and everyone will suffer in accordance with their station. Some chronicles even claim he arranged the impaled bodies in precise geometric patterns, forming circles, stars, or concentric rings. This was not the act of a random sadist. It was an absolute demonstration of power and control. It declared, "I possess such ultimate power that I can transform human suffering into a form of art." A German pamphlet from 1462, which was undoubtedly propaganda, was nonetheless based on eyewitness reports from Saxon merchants in Wallachia. It describes Vlad taking his meals amongst the impaled. He purportedly had a table arranged in the center of a field of stakes and ate his dinner surrounded by dying men, apparently relishing the entire spectacle. Whether this particular event unfolded exactly as written is a matter of historical debate, but the psychological message it conveyed is undeniable. I operate so far beyond your comprehension of human behavior that your horror cannot even touch me. The Saxons, who maintained their own complex and often adversarial relationship with Vlad, distributed these pamphlets far and wide. They represent some of the first mass-produced horror stories in European dark history, complete with gruesome woodcut illustrations. These images, though crude by our standards, were brutally effective, spreading like wildfire across Europe and forever cementing Vlad's terrifying reputation. But a crucial question lingered beneath the surface. Was any of this truly working? Was terror a viable military strategy? Or was Vlad simply a madman drunk on power? The answer arrived in the summer of 1462, proving that Vlad's methods, a cornerstone of his dark history, weren't just effective, they were catastrophically so. Sultan Mehmed II's patience had finally shattered. By early 1462, Vlad had not only defied the empire by refusing to pay tribute, but had also launched audacious raids deep within Ottoman territory, south of the Danube. During one especially vicious campaign, he crossed into Ottoman lands with a small contingent and, according to a letter he penned himself to the Hungarian king, eliminated over 23,000 souls. He even maintained a grim tally, meticulously categorizing his victims by their age and gender. Mehmed, the man who had conquered Constantinople at just 21 years old, who had systematically crushed every rebellion, and who commanded the most formidable military force on the planet, resolved to deal with the Wallachian problem personally in the spring of 1462. He amassed an army estimated to be between 60,000 and 90,000 strong. The precise figure is lost to time, but even the most conservative counts placed it at over triple the entire military-age male population of Wallachia. This wasn't an invasion, it was an eradication, a grim chapter in the region's dark history. Vlad, by contrast, could muster perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 men, most of them peasant conscripts with little to no formal training. A conventional fight would be suicide. So Vlad enacted the very strategy he had been devising since his youth. He denied them a conventional battle entirely. As the Ottoman host marched into Wallachia, they discovered a wasteland. They found only deserted villages, poisoned wells, and fields scorched to ash. Every conceivable source of sustenance and water had been methodically annihilated. Vlad had commanded his own people to flee their homes, retreating deep into the forests and mountains, driving all their livestock before them. The Ottoman supply lines grew perilously long, and that is when the nightly raids commenced. These were no ordinary skirmishes. Vlad had cultivated specialized guerrilla units, small, agile groups of maybe 50 to 100 men who would descend upon the Ottoman camps in the pitch black of night, silencing sentries, igniting fires, and vanishing before any organized defense could be mounted. They systematically targeted supply caravans, pack animals, and ammunition reserves. The objective was never to defeat the army in open combat. It was to infect them with paranoia, to grind them down with exhaustion, and to utterly shatter their morale. But his true masterpiece of terror was unleashed on the night of June 17th, 1462. Through intelligence gleaned from captured Ottoman soldiers, Vlad learned that Sultan Mehmed himself was encamped near Targovishte, protected by his personal guard, the elite Janissaries. This was a singular opportunity, one that would never present itself again. Vlad personally led a force of roughly 10,000 men in what would be forever etched into dark history as the night attack. Cloaked by the darkness, they slipped into the sprawling Ottoman encampment with a single, audacious goal: to kill the Sultan. Accounts from the period describe a scene of pure, unadulterated chaos. The Wallachians, disguised in captured Ottoman uniforms and fluent enough in Turkish, sowed widespread confusion. They set tents ablaze, sent horses stampeding through the camp, and made a beeline for the very section where the Sultan's grand pavilion was pitched. They managed to get within mere yards of Mehmed himself. Some historians even speculate that Vlad and the Sultan locked eyes for a fleeting moment across the fiery chaos of the camp, but the Janissaries' discipline held. They formed an impenetrable defensive ring around their leader after hours of brutal, close-quarters fighting. Vlad knew he could not breach their line. He ordered the retreat, and his men melted back into the night just as mysteriously as they had materialized. While Ottoman casualties were relatively low, perhaps 2,000 men lost. Though their own sources downplay this, the psychological toll was immense. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, nestled in the heart of his own massive army, had been moments away from death at the hands of a vastly smaller force that struck like phantoms. Mehmed's commanders were deeply shaken, his soldiers were utterly spent, and they remained weeks away from the safety of Constantinople, trudging through a deadened land where every shadow could conceal a waiting blade. And then, they finally reached the capital, and they witnessed what Vlad had meticulously prepared for them. No written description can truly capture the scene Mehmed's army confronted on their approach to Targovishte in late June of 1462, but we shall try. Imagine you are an Ottoman soldier, having marched for weeks through a scorched and barren land. You are hungry, exhausted, and your nerves are shattered from constant night raids. For days, you haven't seen the enemy. They have simply vanished. This should be a good sign, yet it feels like a trap. As you near the Wallachian capital, the stench is the first thing that assaults you. If you have ever smelled an animal decaying in the summer heat, multiply that sensation by thousands, then add the sickeningly sweet odor of decomposing human flesh. It is so thick, you can almost taste it on the air. Then you see the stakes. At first, you see 1, then 10, then 100, and then you realize, with dawning horror, that there is no end to them. They stretch to the horizon in every direction. Contemporary accounts state that the field of impaled bodies extended for nearly 2 miles in length and over half a mile in width. Modern historians debate the precise number. Ottoman sources, likely minimizing the scale for propaganda, claim 10,000. Wallachia and Hungarian sources claim as many as 20,000. The truth of this dark history probably lies somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 impaled bodies. But here is what truly chills the blood. This was not random. The stakes were arranged in precise, geometric patterns, forming concentric circles radiating out from the capital, with some sections arranged in rows ordered by height. They formed star patterns that were visible from elevated ground. Vlad had spent weeks, possibly months, preparing this ghastly spectacle. He had captured Ottoman soldiers and sympathizers from earlier raids and border skirmishes, keeping them alive specifically for this very purpose. Some of the bodies had been dead for weeks, rotting in the summer sun, while others had been impaled more recently, and some, according to multiple sources, were still alive. The Byzantine chronicler, Leonikos Chalkokondyles, who interviewed eyewitnesses, wrote that the moans of the dying could be heard across the entire field. Some had been impaled for days, their bodies slowly giving out, too weak to scream but still horrifyingly conscious. The Ottoman troops, these were hardened veterans who had conquered cities and slaughtered countless enemies, reportedly began to vomit. Some refused to advance any further, while others started deserting in the dead of night, willing to face execution rather than proceed through this living nightmare. And at the very center, on the tallest stake of all, was Hamza Pasha, a high-ranking Ottoman commander, captured in an earlier skirmish. His body, dressed in the tattered remains of his military finery, was positioned to directly face the Sultan's approaching army, a personal message from Vlad to Mehmed. "This is what I do to your best men. Imagine what I will do to you." Sultan Mehmed II, remember? This is the man who watched the walls of Constantinople crumble before his cannons, a man who had ordered his own share of executions and massacres, reportedly stopped his horse and stared in silence for several minutes. Different sources record different versions of his response, but the most widely accepted comes from Chalkokondyles. It is not possible to deprive of his country a man who has done such great deeds, who knows how to put his power to such use. This was not praise, it was a chilling recognition, an acknowledgement of a new standard in dark history. The Sultan was admitting that he faced something he did not fully understand, a mind that had taken Ottoman methods of terror and evolved them into something even the Ottomans themselves could not stomach. The military situation was already deteriorating. Supply lines were overstretched. The scorched earth tactics had worked perfectly, and the nightly raids had destroyed morale. The Sultan's own commanders were advising a retreat, but the forest of the Impaled was the psychological breaking point. It proved that conventional military strategy did not apply here. Vlad was not trying to win battles, he was trying to break minds, and it was working. Within days, Mehmed ordered a general retreat. The Sultan left a contingent under the command of Vlad's younger brother, Radu, to maintain pressure on Vlad, while he himself retreated with the bulk of his forces. The mightiest military force on the planet had invaded a tiny principality with superior numbers, only to be repelled. They were not defeated in a conventional battle, but broken by pure psychological terror. Vlad the Impaler had achieved victory, but this chapter of his dark history was far from over. For what followed unveils the ultimate tragedy. The very terror that brought him success would inevitably consume him from within. One would assume that repelling the Ottoman Empire would cement Vlad's status as a hero throughout Christian Europe, and for a time, it seemed to. While the Hungarian king and the Pope lauded his stand for Christendom, they failed to grasp a crucial truth. Vlad was incapable of switching off his brutality. The very tactics that had driven back the Ottomans were now unleashed upon his own people. By late 1462, Vlad was impaling Wallachian merchants accused of profiteering. He impaled boyars on mere whispers of disloyalty and entire villages for the slightest offences. The weapon he had crafted to vanquish a greater foe had become his sole instrument of governance. Consequently, his political standing crumbled with alarming speed, while his brother Radu, funded by Ottoman wealth and reinforced by their soldiers, presented himself as the rational choice. Support from Hungary vanished. Vlad's progressively unpredictable conduct pushed his allies away. By November of 1462, a mere few months after his most celebrated victory, he was compelled to seek refuge in Hungarian territory. And in a twist of bitter irony, he was promptly imprisoned by the very man he considered an ally, King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary. The official charges remain shrouded in mystery even today. Some accounts claim Matthias forged letters to frame Vlad for treasonous negotiations with the Ottomans. Others propose that Vlad had become so volatile that his Christian allies simply wanted him removed from the board. This grim turn marks another chapter in his dark history, as he spent the next 12 years in Hungarian captivity. This was not the harsh confinement of his youth under the Ottomans, but a comfortable house arrest. He was even permitted to marry a Hungarian noblewoman and father children. By all reports, he behaved as a model prisoner. Yet in 1476, a new opportunity arose, as Wallachia descended into chaos under a succession of feeble leaders. The Prince of Moldavia, Stephen the Great, helped engineer Vlad's restoration to the throne, providing him with Hungarian and Moldavian military support. Vlad seized his throne once more in November of 1476, but his reign would last perhaps only 2 months. Sometime in December of 1476 or January of 1477, the precise date has been lost to time, Vlad was slain in a battle against Ottoman forces near Bucharest, under circumstances that remain unclear. Some chronicles suggest he was cut down by his own men, whether by betrayal or mistaken identity in the fog of war. Others contend he was simply overrun by Ottoman soldiers. What is known for certain is the gruesome aftermath. His head was severed, preserved in honey, and dispatched to Sultan Mehmed in Constantinople as undeniable proof of his demise. After all the terror, the forests of the Impaled, and the psychological warfare, Vlad's life concluded with him becoming a grotesque trophy. His head was put on public display for ridicule in the capital of the empire he had battled his entire life. His body, it is said, was interred at Snagov Monastery, located on an island in modern-day Romania. Although excavations in the 1930s uncovered a tomb, it was found to be empty. To this day, the location of Vlad's remains is unknown. So, how are we to interpret this legacy? In Romania, Vlad is frequently revered as a national hero, a ruthless but effective ruler who defied impossible odds to safeguard his nation's independence. You will find statues in his honor and his likeness on tourist souvenirs. Yet, to the wider world, particularly after Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, Dracula, which loosely appropriated his name and a sliver of his dark history, Vlad's identity became fused with vampirism and a kind of supernatural malevolence. In a strange way, this mythological framing absolves us. It is far more comfortable to label him a monster, something not quite human, than to face the true horror of his story. Because the true horror is precisely this. Everything Vlad did was profoundly, disturbingly, and terrifyingly human. He was not born a monster. He was forged by a brutal system that taught him power is achieved through terror, and that survival demands absolute ruthlessness, that empathy was a liability, a lesson he would hone to its most terrifying conclusion. The Forest of the Impaled wasn't a product of insanity, it was a masterclass in applied psychology. The night raids were not chaotic acts of violence, they were surgical, military strikes. Every impalement, every grotesque mutilation, every public spectacle of agony was a meticulously planned move on a much larger chessboard. And here is the truth that should chill you to the bone. It was brutally effective. Against insurmountable odds, using nothing but orchestrated terror, Vlad brought an entire empire to its knees. He proved that fear, when properly weaponized, could accomplish what legions of soldiers could not. The real question isn't whether Vlad was a monster. That much is clear. The truly unsettling question is, what does his success reveal about the very core of human nature? And what other calculated atrocities lie buried in the shadows of our dark history, waiting to impart lessons we'd rather ignore? If you want to keep unearthing the uncomfortable truths that official accounts conveniently omit, subscribe, because the most crucial chapters of our dark history aren't just about what occurred, they're about understanding the mechanics of why it worked. And that is precisely the kind of knowledge we cannot afford to let fade away.